All right, guys. I really can't believe that this episode is actually happening. There's so much going to happen here, and so many things have had to come together. This story has been waiting to be told for nearly 20 years. So let's start off this way. You're in my guitar shed, and I started building guitars. I built one that was kind of an aid to help somebody understand that my child, Tami, who's right there, who passed away. By the way, there is a playlist up here that has the introduction episode and all that kind of thing, so we can kind of get that out of the way. But I actually built this guitar to help people understand her potential, because she wasn't doing well on the standard assessment tests that the results were informing her cognition levels and IEPs and special education programs and all that kind of thing, as well as therapies that go with that. So this guitar shop exists because of this guitar, and at some point it got to where my guitars became known because my daughter Tami, who passed away almost a year ago, was signing the guitars. That's something that was never ever supposed to be able to happen. And we are actually, in this episode, going to meet the person that is responsible for that happening. Now, I'm going to try to keep this short, but the lead into it is so significant, because what if I told you that you got your diagnosis and you do what everybody does, you listen to what they have to say, they give you some handouts, you immediately start diving into the internet, and then you start finding out things, and one of the first things you might find out is there are profound challenges, some of the cognitive, physical, medical, communicative, just this, and CdLS is not typically a condition of longevity. So you will have some people that, and this is a very tender topic, so I just talk, and I've lived through a lot, so try to keep that in mind. I'm not trying to insult anybody, but there are some kids that don't make it a couple days, months, years, and when you start getting up into people that are past 20 and up into 30 and even 40, it is rare, almost as rare as the condition is itself. So let's start there. I want you to think about the experience people have with CdLS. Do you know any other parents, if you're a parent of a CdLS child, did you ever meet another one on the street where you just went, oh, I see the telltale signs, I see the telltale mannerisms? Or did you meet everyone over social media and through support groups? So I want you to think about that. And depending on who you talk to, you're between 1 in 10,000, 1 in 30,000, 1 in 50,000 live births, so it's very rare. I want you to think about who has experience with this kind of stuff. So I've got a few cheat notes going on in the background, but considering how rare it is, and considering the different levels of how people are affected, some of them so lightly that it goes undiagnosed, others profoundly, and then there's a myriad of things that affect cognition, fine motor function, the ability to communicate, all those things. So you start breaking those subgroups down, and this is rarity. So when you start talking about professionals who are involved with, just cut to the chase, experienced at dealing with CdLS, That's rare. So let's say you get a referral to a doctor. That doctor might see your child at first every 6 months, and they put a chart down. By the way, it's so important to me to try to arrange your medical care to a place where everybody can just pull up the chart. You know, you got a neurologist, you got an orthopedic, you got an ophthalmologist, you've got all kinds of things, dentistry, all that. If you can put that in a place and then find out there's a geneticist there that knows something about this, you can kind of avoid the typical spend most of your time talking about it, then they come in and ask questions, and then you parents know what I'm talking about. Sometimes you want to get a t-shirt that says it's CdLS, they don't talk, they don't do this, they don't do this, we're here today because we need to know this, and this is a follow-up for this and this and this. You guys get it if you've dealt with it. But the point is that there are very few, even professionals, that have experience. Like, I will ask, have you dealt with CdLS kids before? The gastrointestinal person, yeah, 5 or 6 through my career, and I'm looking at somebody who's got a 35-year career. So it's really rare that you have practical day in and day out experience. So whatever you're doing as a parent, think about your level of day in, day out, week in, week out experience that is so rare. But when we're talking about therapists, what if I said to you, I can tell you what this therapy with could be, let's talk about that just for a minute. Speech language pathology, what does that mean? Speech language pathology. You will have some speech language pathologists tell you, oh, I only deal with speech, and we're hitting a plateau here. It is really about communicating. That's what it's really about. And I've talked a little bit in an episode about AAC devices. I'm going to try to give you links up here about what the difference between medical and educational is. In fact, I think the second episode I did was about that difference. I'm trying to build these to kind of get you, especially the newer parents, the older ones may look at some of the stuff that I'm putting up and say, yeah, I kind of had that experience, but it was different. Of course, CdLS is different in how it manifests itself. But one of the things you got to come to grips with really quick is when the child hits public school, the focus is not on the medical condition per se. It is on how this condition impedes access to curriculum, or whatever that means for your child. But what if I told you that, for example, one of these therapies, again, speech language pathology, before public schools, it's called physical therapy. After that, it's called adaptive physical education. It's kind of the same thing. Kids have gym class. You know, it's an accommodation of that. Occupational therapy, which can be any number of things that involve writing. Before you hit public school, you may have someone that's teaching your child how to feed and eat. There's just any number of things. But remember, when you hit public school, it's about whether or not the condition needs support to access curriculum. So what if I told you that I could tell you that before you start the therapy, 18 years later, it would end up with this, exactly this? What if I told you that? Well, I can tell you that because I've lived through it and my child is not with us anymore. So what's really fascinating to me is I have to look at this from a couple of different ways. Number one, I'm a parent, so I have hopes. Sometimes those hopes aren't realistic. When you start looking at the charts and you start looking at the information coming out of the foundation, the growth charts, typical cognitive capacity, typical physical capabilities, fine motor skills, lifespans, all those kinds of things. You can always tell yourself, I'm going to be the one. We got a kid that's going to be the one that beats the odds, and I hope you're doing that. I really do. Because on the other side of that coin is I just give up. Okay, we don't want that. As a parent, try to look ahead, and instead of saying, no, we're going to beat all this doesn't exist, I'm in denial about this, we're going to look at it and we're going to figure out, okay, what's important first? And when is that important? Do I see that being important like a month from now, 6 months from now? Where can I realistically feel like I should be? Well, school's going to help you with that. We're going to talk about that in a minute here. But in addition to being a parent, I am also a school board member going into my 10th year. Now, school board stuff is kind of interesting. I did a tongue-in-cheek series called School Board Insider. It's up there. It talks about the politics of things, what it's like to go into the closed session where decisions are made about things including employee discipline, union agreements, and most importantly for you guys, that's where the special education settlements are talked about. I did something on that where I'm kind of telling you, the lawyer's doing this, you're at this point. By the way, when you start telling your school district, I'm lawyering up or I have a legal issue here, right there, you've just opened the door to an attorney, and that is who's going to deal with you now. You become a legal threat instead of a curious or frustrated parent. There's a big difference. But I sit on a school board. Now, some school board members, they're like, oh, I'm on the school board. Yeah, your kid's in trouble. Just get a hold of me. Or, yeah, my kid is going to get what they need right now. An effective school board member is not those things. If you are those things, you're going to get in trouble at some point. It can be trouble with the same community that voted for you, and you think these people are coming to you and you're the change agent. Well, the school district I sit on has been around. It's the second oldest district in the state of California. It's small and it's had its challenges, but am I really going to bring anything to the table? It has not been brought up since the 1880s, probably not. So you can disenfranchise yourself from the people that kind of wanted you to pay attention to their interests, or you can get yourself in trouble by giving the superintendent directions and, making yourself too deep in, ear close to the ground, and then you start giving direction. You might even find yourself in legal problems again. That's all up there. So, if I'm on the school board and I have a parent that's fighting with the staff, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. At some point, somebody's going to say, what's reasonable? And is it reasonable at the expense of the other kids in the district, because we get funded by this and this? And some parents don't want to hear this, but it's reality. Think about it. What if I told you that I was going to put years, so starting at 3 years old, we're going to do a certain type of therapy, and we're going to do it for the next, till the child's 18 years old, and even 4 years past that. And there would only be one outcome that was significant, and that outcome is typically something the other kids have out of the way by the time they're in first grade. For some kids, that's 2 years into it. Now there's pre-K and TK and all that. But the big thing is going to be, this kid is going to do something finally at 18 years old that most kids do at 2, and we're going to support at second grade, first grade, second grade, and we're going to support that all the way across the board with expensive therapy. If I'm a school board member, that's not something that I can realistically do. It's what comes with it. And then lastly, I'm a public servant. I run a division of a public agency, a municipal agency that has a great reputation for service, focus on service. So I have to kind of look at equity. I have to look at budgets. I have to assign work equitably. I have to deal with emergency situations. I have to deal with things that pop up that aren't the standard service level. So I kind of have a good ability in that area. Plus, I have to answer to commissions and ultimately a city council that looks at my programs and finds them valid enough to fund or not. And I've had a good luck with that. But that's kind of what's brewing in here. And then add on that I build guitars for the purpose of raising awareness for disabled, especially nonverbal children. And I'm going to give you a few links. There's been a couple of newspapers and internet journals that have kind of picked up on this and figured out what's going on. And I'll give you a couple links below. So the big thing about the guitars is if they can get someone to stop for a second and find out how to touch somebody's life that needs help, then I've done my job as a parent, and it certainly beats feeling hopeless and all the rest of that kind of thing. When you see that your child has some type of a skill that motivates others to do things that they can't do themselves, that's meaningful. So what we are going to do here now is we're going to remember that I'm able to see what effort from the time Tami was 3 until she passed away at 18 and a half, the direct effects of the therapist you're about to meet. And once we hear from the therapist, who I've encouraged to tell you a little bit about who they are, what motivated them to get into this line of service, because it's not glorious. I'm going to tell you, sorry I'm dragging this on, but I'm going to tell you there are shenanigans going on in the special education world, and I explained some in, I think, the last episode I did called Are You Fighting for Nothing?, where you've got somebody that's dedicated, who's able to do, these therapists can do this. They do the original initial assessment. They set goals. Remember me talking to you a few minutes ago about goals? Like, what, rather than looking at this big picture, and I want my kid to break the mold, beat the odds. It's like, what can we expect to happen in the next period of time? And we can be a little bit optimistic. And what is it going to take in terms of therapy and effort to produce that, and how do we measure it? Remember, these therapists may have somebody above them that's saying, well, we've reached the regional norm on identifying autistic-like behavior, or whatever it might be, and basically send the message out to the SPED staff in the school, yeah, we're done identifying. You get that going on. You got some financial directors will say special education is an encroachment on the general fund. Really? Wow, Einstein. IDEA has never been funded at more than 25%, so that's kind of a captain obvious thing. So sometimes these therapists are caught between administrators that are just want to squelch programs. They see the effort going into these kids to produce virtually zero result, and they have picked this line of work. Sometimes it's very personal why they do it. They fight for your child, and then a couple errant comments and threats and all this kind of thing. You're basically taking someone's champion, your child, and cutting their legs off by initiating some type of actions from above or whatever. But the therapist, I want to guarantee you, she was significant in Tami's life, her efforts are huge in comparison to the number of guitars and people that have them out there in Tami's story, as you'll be able to see when you click those links below. We're going to hear directly who this person is, why they do what they do, and what their work specifically with Tami was about. And this is a rare, rare opportunity to get someone to be able to talk about it and give practical experience. I just encourage them, just turn the camera on, let it roll, and I will close out once we hear from Jen.
Wow, I seriously don't know how I follow that intro, but I guess I'm here and I will give it a shot. I am Jen Edick, and my journey into the world of education, specifically special education, has been a long and winding path of many, many experiences. I knew from a very young age that I wanted to work with kids. My mom was an elementary school teacher for over 30 years, and I often growing up, I was helping her in her classroom and setting things up for her. All through high school, I worked at a learning center as a tutor. And then in college, I discovered a passion for working with children with disabilities. I received a bachelor's degree in communicative disorders and sciences, which could also be known as speech therapy. And I also received a master's degree and a doctoral degree in occupational therapy. Throughout all my studies, I dove into finding creative ways that would help people, specifically children in my case, develop or adapt the skills they needed for everyday living, learning, working, all the things. The bottom line is that I wanted to give my clients the ability to participate in meaningful activities within their daily lives. My professional career began in an early intervention clinic, working with children that were 0 to 3 years of age. And in the clinic setting, you could work on just about anything. You could make goals in a wide range of skills. I could work on feeding and dressing and motor and sensory. There was always a focus on meeting developmental milestones. And a lot of parents would say, catch them up. After 5 years in the clinic setting, I was hired by a school district, and not just any school district. I was hired by Tami's school district. I was working with students from preschool to high school age with a wide variety of disabilities. I quickly learned about the educational code and what areas I could address within the school setting. One thing that stunned me was the amount of teachers that thought that the occupational therapist was just there to work on handwriting skills. There were so many times I would be walking down the hallway and I'd be stopped by a teacher and they'd say, "Oh, Johnny needs occupational therapy services." For what? Well, the handwriting is really sloppy. Uh, so I decided to make it my goal to show staff that the job of the school-based occupational therapist goes far beyond handwriting. It can include a number of areas such as sensory processing, bilateral coordination, motor planning, self-help skills, activities of daily living, and all of these areas can have a direct impact on how a student is able to access the school environment. When I first started working with students with disabilities, I thought my role was to teach them the skills and essentially to help them catch up because that's what we're taught in school. I measured progress in benchmarks, percentages, IEP goals, and those were all to meet the requirements of the school district to help them be in compliance. But as I continued my work with the students, my mindset shifted because most of my students didn't fit into that neat little box or the standard milestones that everyone should meet. While I was still required to meet the compliance requirements of the school, I realized something really powerful. I realized that communication isn't always verbal and connection doesn't always need words. And education, education isn't just about academics. It's about seeing the whole child. And so I started approaching my school-based practice from multiple perspectives. I was taking into consideration what are the parents' goals for their child? What are the student's current abilities? How is the student accessing the different settings within the educational environment? You know, they have to access the classroom and they have to go on the playground and the cafeteria. And most of all, what are the students' interests and what motivates them? What sparks joy in their life? All students, regardless of skill level or disability, have strengths and interests and an ability to learn. It's just a matter of taking in all the information and focusing on making a meaningful plan for each unique student. All students should feel proud and successful within the school setting. So at this point in my career, my goal was to help students participate in meaningful activities within their daily lives through the focus of being student-centered. Seeing the whole child means understanding that growth doesn't always show up in test scores and perfect grades. Sometimes it's just in a moment that a student makes eye contact for the first time or advocates for themselves, or they simply show up when yesterday they couldn't show up. Celebrate the small wins because the small wins are big wins for a lot of these students. And this is where specifically my journey intersected with Tami. I had never worked with a student that had CdLS before. I remember combing through Tami's records and reading reports from all sorts of different professionals and gaining more information from online research and anything I could dive into. But when I first met Tami, she didn't speak a single word. She communicated everything through her presence. Every morning, Tami would walk down the hallway, and as people passed by, she'd wave or she'd flash this huge smile. And it didn't matter if you were the principal or another student or the custodian or even just some occupational therapist. Tami saw you. And in that moment, you would feel seen too. Let me share a little bit about my relationship with Tami and as her school-based occupational therapist. We spent many days a week together. Tami loved music, every type of music. So if a song came on in the classroom, she would sway or clap or her legs and tap her feet. She loved rhythm. It seemed to be her way of connecting to the world. She also loved swinging on the swings on the playground. Whenever she was given the opportunity to be out on the playground, her first choice was the swings. There was so much joy on Tami's face when she engaged in music and swinging, all these activities that she loved. But when it came to routines of the school day, like lunchtime, Tami often needed a lot of adult support. An adult would unzip her lunchbox and open her snacks and assist her with manipulating her food. One day I was watching the lunch process and I thought, what would it take for Tami to do just one part of this lunch process on her own? So we started small. We worked on unzipping her lunchbox, incorporating Tami's fine motor skills, bilateral coordination skills, as she had to hold the lunchbox with one hand and unzip with the other. Instead of rushing through the lunch process and setting her up, we patiently gave Tami the space to independently open her lunchbox. We started with maximum hand over hand assistance and faded down to minimum assistance. And then eventually, Tami could open her lunchbox independently. Each small little step was a massive victory that gave Tami more control over her mealtime. Next, we practiced opening Ziploc bags and eating with utensils. These skills weren't just about eating lunch. They were about giving Tami independence and about preserving Tami's dignity. Eventually, Tami could open her lunchbox, unzip it, open her snacks with minimal assistance, and sit with her peers. So she was actually eating with her peers, not beside her peers. To an outsider, all of this may have looked like a very, very small thing. But for Tami, this routine broke down a barrier of access to her school environment. As Tami grew older, we started thinking about her future and about small everyday tasks that might symbolize independence or adulthood. And one of our goals was for her to be able to sign her name. At first, we started with tracing a capital T within the boundaries of a box. And it was great because a capital T is a great place to start because it's one vertical line and one horizontal line. And vertical and horizontal lines are both the first pre-writing shapes to develop. We worked our way through each letter, tracing it, copying it, and then independently writing. We used such a variety of multimodal tools to make sure that we were learning all of this with everything we could. We used pencils, markers, whiteboards, magnet boards, Play-Doh, sand, you name it, I think we did it. Every letter that we learned was a step towards Tami and her self-advocacy. Teaching her to write her name was not just about handwriting. It was about giving her a voice for the future. That's to me what seeing the whole child means. It means preparing them not just to pass a test, but to live their life. Before I worked with students like Tami in the school setting, I thought success looked like straight A's and high test scores because that's what we were always taught. I quickly learned that success happens in the moments of connection, in the moments of self-advocacy, and in the moments that spark joy. Students like Tami taught me to slow down, look beyond the labels, and see potential You can see potential in every little gesture, every spark, every smile. They taught me to celebrate progress in all its forms. Because for some students, success is an A on a paper. But for other students, success is zipping up a lunchbox for the very first time. I would really encourage you to celebrate the successes. After 8 years of working with as a school-based occupational therapist, I was offered an opportunity to oversee a special education department. This position has allowed me to grow a department that is focused on the whole student, building meaningful connections, and sparking joy through learning. In my opinion, schools all too often focus on the sameness. They focus on teaching everyone in the same way, testing everyone in the same way, and then expecting the same results. The great thing about my job as a school-based occupational therapist or a special education director, I want to incorporate the creativity and step outside of that box, because real education happens when we break out of the box, when we personalize for students and innovate, and most importantly, connect with them. When we see students not as just data points for compliance, but we see them as whole human beings that have strengths and passions and potential that's just sitting there waiting to be unlocked. Tami is forever going to be a special part of my journey, and she is going to hold a piece of my heart forever. She didn't need to speak to teach me something really profound. She showed me that every student, no matter their ability, has something to say, something to offer, and something worth celebrating. Because when you take the time to see the whole child, we don't just change their world, they change ours. And Tami did that just for me.
Okay, guys, I had to take a bit when I got that and just think about it on so many different levels. And I'm going to start with the stuff that's not going to make me emotional first, and then we'll end with the daddy part. So, again, I tend to look at things as a parent, and a parent is something different than a parent advocate. I look at things as a program manager for a public agency. So I kind of look at service, how it's delivered, if it's effective, whether the customers value the service as much or more than the person that's giving the service. That's kind of unheard of nowadays. And then when it comes to a school board member, I kind of look at things like, okay, my community elected me in a ballot box. And in a little town, that might not seem big, but in a little town, it's where character is built. And people that have character, that trust their kids to your system, you want to be able to look them in the face. And part of that is, are the policies fair? Are we just checking the box? Or are we helping kids with the tools they're going to need to be successful, whatever that may mean? And in the case of CdLS, that can look like something very different. So I'm going to hold the daddy part to the end. The first thing I want you to notice about Jen is versatile. I think one of the biggest problems in detach is when you go from the early intervention stuff that your state or county agencies are providing, the Head Start stuff, to multiple births, certain genetic conditions. And you get those therapies that come with that, where if you're the parent, you are the Uber, you're the taxi, you're the one getting feedback, giving input, participating in the therapy. It's you're there. And you're dropping the kid off to the therapist. And again, I've got a playlist up there that talks about what are you fighting for and all that kind of thing. But you go from that, in California, it's a regional center, to public school, and nobody tells you, hey, there's medical stuff that drops off the map here, there's life stuff that drops off the map here. Now it's strictly about access to the curriculum and education. And if it's not that, well, then you can go. Jen gets it. She has been in the clinical practice outside of school districts, and she has dealt with school districts where you're working for administrators, and sometimes that's very difficult. I will leave it at that. So she gets it, how difficult it is when it's a medical thing, when it's a life skills thing, and when it's education and the administration is kind of not on the same page with you. Next thing I want to tell you about is Jen has multiple capacities. You heard her say she started off studying speech language pathology or whatever she called it. So that usually leads to, I'm going to be a speech language pathologist. And no, instead, she goes on to become an OT, and you can tell the way she's talking, she's looking at communication, physical functions, and how that all ties together to be able to write your name and do tasks that get you around the campus and participate in things. While the general education group might be looking at this like very narrow lens of, I just need you to have that kid write better. The people before that are looking at this kind of like, well, we're going to give you so much physical therapy, but if we don't see things moving along, we're not going to make you eligible for more physical therapy. So Jen's kind of this person that fits in the middle and kind of looks at it and says, I understand this part of it, and I understand this part of it. So you're going to see communication challenges in CdLS, physical challenges, and doing things like writing and simple things that other kids can do with ease in a classroom as they normally develop. These tend to be challenges. So if you have someone that has a multiple look and mainly a respect for the different disciplines that your child is going to need help from, that's a good thing. And when I look at this as a program manager, I'm wondering, you get, everybody wants to be in a silo. We got this group over here, we got our funding, we got our stuff. During budget cutback, we want to be over here, and the whole agency can be detached from the customer perspective. For example, when you walk into a service desk, people don't understand. On my tax bill, it doesn't say you're going to pick up my trash, you're going to give me sewer, you're going to give me water, you're going to trim my trees every once in a while, all that kind of stuff. You're just paying the bill, and you kind of think that when you go in to see somebody in an agency, they're going to kind of have an idea that maybe you feel that way. You don't want to manage your situation yourself. So I think Jen has a good skill set for that, and that's why I think she jumped up to being a special education director for a whole system. She's got a way of looking at things collectively and cooperatively for an outcome that's based on the student. Okay, this is going to be one of the most difficult ones. As a school board member, I'm looking at a lot of different things. Graduation is one of my most favorite times of the year because all of the negotiations, the contracts, the laws, the challenges, all that go out the window. Some of the most difficult decisions a board member has to make is, are kids getting expelled or suspended? Are Are there difficult negotiations going on? How is staff morale? How are the teachers? How's the teacher shortage? Are we putting the best we can in the classrooms? All that stuff goes away at graduation time when you're watching people come across the stage and you're feeling good that this little community put people out there that are good, honest people that are going to go out and represent what our little town is all about. Now, when I sat up there this last spring, the school had set up a chair because Tam was supposed to cross the stage, and there was a picture of Tam, and they gave me the certificate, and Kendra flew in from law school out east, and we had a moment, but it was just sobering to watch all these faces that you knew had worked so hard through their career as a student. And sometimes I think it's pretty easy to forget these kids have a job, and that's to be a student. And sometimes I wonder if everybody that's involved in their lives is kind of looking at it like, how you doing on your job today? How did it go? And I think if we'd approach it that way, it would be better. Now, if you're doing that now, go ahead. Listen, I had to have 5 kids before I got halfway proficient at it. But Jen is able to look at kids and say, this kid needs this to get here, right here. You don't hear her say, well, this kid is going to get this to get here. Without that, they'll never get here. And by the way, they'll never get up here. And if your child has CdLS, you are very familiar with that attitude. So when I'm looking at competence of staff, especially administrative staff, I would be very happy to see that you've got someone like Jen who has multiple capacities, has developed themselves where they know something about a number of different things, can tell you how important it is that they go together, how to administrate that, and be able to think about not only the whole program and how it works for all the kids, but be able to give you the kind of details that she did. You can tell that she knew Tam. Okay, this is going to be the rough part. I started this off by saying, wouldn't it be odd to be able to look at a therapy before it happened and know what the outcome was going to be? I will tell you this. If I knew at 6 months old, someone were to tell me the biggest thing that your child is ever going to be able to do is write their name, their own name. They're not going to be able to say daddy. They'll never be able to cross the street by themselves. They're going to have very low safety awareness. They're going to be able to do some simple stuff as they get older. They're going to be able to work hard. You're going to feel like what a challenge that is to process. My kid's a hard worker. They're a great person. I've told you before, Tami was not capable of thinking badly about people. The cognitive limitation might have been a blessing because God knows that. Well, we'll just leave that alone. Let's just say I'm not Tam, and there's a lot of things I'm going to have to answer for. But at the end of the day, Jen making that signature important was about Tami's dignity. Now, as I look back, in the last 2 or 3 days alone, I have heard that on Friday, October 10th, there's going to be a song coming out called Smoke Spiral. And somehow, 7 years or so after I provided somebody with a guitar that Tam signed, it was made out of a cigar box, it's going to be on the recording. I'm getting notices, like I saw a video that came out of Foxfire Ranch down in Mississippi from Cody Harrow and Brian Shaw on drums, playing a guitar that looks like this one that Tam signed, like this one. There's music cranking out all over the place. There's an album that just come out in Ireland. There's a protest song up front called Not a Penny for the Earl. It's about a lake that's massively polluted. And the guitarist for that group just sat down with an amp and a guitar during a break and recorded a song, and it's on a guitar that was built in this shop that Tami signed. And you can think, well, all the kid can do is sign their name. It is a blessing. Her ability to sign her name is a blessing. This guitar right here on the cover of this album was built in the shop. Tam signed it, and sat in the living room and watched the person play it for the first time as they come through here, jumped off a plane, and from LAX, and picked up some guitars here to go play a big blues festival. I mean, Mr. Airplane Man, Tam brought me this song on her device, Sun Sinking Low, and then the next thing you know, Margaret Garrett recorded this whole album on a guitar that was built in the shop that Tami signed. There's just a ton of stuff going on. You gotta love Bob. Bob puts credits to Tami on just about everything he does. Look on the back, it references Tami. Nobody knew who Tami was. Tami couldn't talk, she couldn't say a word. And now she's gone, but I'll tell you what, everybody knows Tami. This AI thing, I don't know what to think about it, but if you go to artificial intelligence and type in who was Tami Falsgraf, Pfalzgraf, you will find this profound thing about a kid who could not talk, who could not do some of the most simple things, but was taught to sign her name by Jen, the person you just saw, and who lives on in the music world in a way, I don't know. Jen, as a father of a child with a very profound set of challenges, you are angelic. Guys, if you're dealing with therapists and you're dealing with people and trying to get help from your school system or whatever agency you're working for, go back and watch what Jen said. Look for a combination of multiple disciplines, because that means the person is working on developing themselves and making sure. There's nothing worse than having somebody up here that doesn't advance themselves and doesn't promote their staff from below to be the best that they can be. I have people at work now that outrank me in their knowledge level. I never finished college. I barely went. But at the end of the day, look for capacity. And if you can't find capacity, help build it. Be complimentary, be realistic, and don't be that parent that because of your actions and you're almost demanding something that could never possibly happen. Look, I should be sitting here being bitter. All my kid could do was write 4 letters of her name, and she got good enough to put a heart on the I. If that's all half this world could do with this kind of result, I think that's all you need to do. Guys, I will try to get some other people who have worked with Tam that knew her personally and get them on here, a number of people. I'll also talk about navigating some of the educational stuff and the health stuff and whatever. I would appreciate it very much if you would send me an email or comment away on what your experiences are. Keep them positive. I'm not here to bash on anybody. I'm certainly not here for a whose kids got it worse thing, but I love to hear from you. Guys, fathers, your kids need to take on your interests and understand them. That's the best gift you can give them. Whatever you're working on in the garage, don't be the dad that makes it miserable for the kid. When the mother says, go out there, your dad's working on the car, and you're out there all frustrated, so you yell at your kid. Don't be that kind of dad. Give them the gift of your family, you and the generations before you guys. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't. Pass this along to somebody that needs it. I'll see you soon.
So a year and a half ago, this guy Ken wrote to me out of the blue and said, my daughter Tami really loves your music, and would you like a cigar box guitar? He kind of custom makes this guitar. He used a Mr. Airplane Man poster on the front and on the back. And this itself is just a cigar box, you know? And he found like these matchbooks from this camp that Tara and I met, Wakila Camp. First place we played in LA was Spaceland, so he got that. And the reason that he made it is because his daughter Tami was born with this condition that renders her nonverbal, but she loves music. She loves slide guitar blues. I think for her, like, music is just this way to, you know, express herself. And so Ken, in a way, helps connect his daughter to the music she loves by making these guitars. It's kind of her way of, it's like we speak for her through our guitar.